Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am so glad to see you here tonight, and I can't wait for you to see what's in store for you. My name is Aaron Kleinard. I see so many familiar faces from the community, from friends, from people who love High Point, people who are interested in High Point and want to find out what we're going to do in High Point. So a special welcome to all of you. I'm going to dispense with recognitions tonight because we have a lot of information that Mr. Dewani wants to present to you. I do want to say another special thanks to High Point University for being so kind in offering these facilities to us, because it's a perfect place to do what we're going to do tonight. It's just real interesting to see the amount of support that they give all of us here in this community. So let's give High Point University a round of applause. I told somebody earlier tonight, I have no idea what I'm going to say tonight, but I'm going to speak to you from my heart. I cannot tell you the amount of time and effort and hours and talent that has been put into what you're going to see tonight. I'd be less than honest if I told you I've seen this, because I haven't. I'm going to be just as surprised as you are, so I'm nervous as a house cat to see what it is High Point's going to look like. But I know that from all I have seen exhibited in the 11 meetings that we've had over the last week and a half, you are not going to believe it. You just won't believe it. I am going to take exception and do one introduction and one thank you that I don't think we can do without tonight. I would like for all of the members of the Dewani team who are here tonight to please stand up and let us thank you with our applause. Gentlemen, ladies. These folks are real pros, and you're going to see that with evidence in a few moments. One last thing I want to say, and then I'll turn the program over to the man. This is just the beginning. What you're going to see tonight is the result of hours and days and weeks of work. What happens next, though, is just as important. About 300 High Pointers have been coming to the Charettes over the past week and a half to share their ideas of what we should be and what we should have and what High Point needs. We've been making our own dream. So tonight you're going to see that dream in pictures and in words from, again, the very best in the world, Andreas Dewani.
Before I forget, in a kind of mutual admiration society, I'd like to thank Aaron for shepherding me through much that is important. You know, you walk in to meet me, and I don't really know who you are. And it's my tendency to treat everybody rather well. And he actually corrects me in that regard. He says, I'm kidding. But Aaron has been a great shepherd. He and Wendy Fusco have done a tremendous job raising the very substantial amount of funds that were necessary to do this kind of work. And of course, we have the local partner, Peter Freeman, who may actually have conceived this whole thing. You know, a resident, an architect, of course, our joint venture partner, but he might have conceived this for the sake of his town. And I think for him and for his son and his wife, it's critical that this be a place worth living in. You know, it's really, and I think a lot of the goodwill in this town is autobiographical. You know, people come in and say, I love it. What can you do? And I want you to make it more lovable, in fact. You care for it. There's also Nito Cobain, who is, I don't think that if he hadn't somehow been so enthusiastic when I first came to speak here about 6 months ago, he was enthusiastic about the messages. And I don't know, because I haven't been told, but it could be that High Point University provided the most substantial contribution to the fee. And I think a lot follows from that. It's a very, it's a tremendous leadership position in this city. So I want to thank them. And I promised Wendy to please mention economics. And I think that I only speak of economics when I speak, but it's a very roundabout way of doing so. And it is to make this place worth living in as a result of it being a place that actually can provide jobs and a life for the next generation and the generation after that. Over the week, and it's only been a week since I spoke to you last Wednesday. Let me leave this alone. Over the week, I had a very simple conception of what had been happening here, in terms of the international market centers and this very strange relationship you have to your downtown, which is dominated by a single entity. It's the most complete monoculture I've ever seen, the International Marketing Center. It serves you well because it pays a great deal of taxes, but on the other hand, when it's gone, the whole downtown hibernates. And you've actually adjusted to this very peculiar position. And for us, that was the principal reality. And I'm going to get back to that. The situation to remember is that we as planners are futurists. And while you have a reality in which you are experts, you know much better than I ever will what this is really like, we have a kind of discipline which is about the future. Sometimes a little scary, but we extrapolate. Spend a lot of time thinking about what the 21st century will be like and reading and so forth. And it's going to be a difficult century. It's going to be very challenging. It's not going to be like the 20th. And we really do have to think differently because there's been too many barnacles and accretions that have occurred, and bad habits actually, that have occurred as a result of the excessive wealth that we experienced towards the end of the 20th century. And a lot of it is gone. And I'd like to remind you that even though we've had 3 essentially overlaid crises in the 20th century that have really given us a shock, the real estate bubble, the consciousness of climate change, perhaps not the reality, but the consciousness of climate change. It casts a pall on you that, big bad thing may be happening. And also peak oil. You might say, well, what's peak oil? We just discovered the shale this and the, that. Just ask an airliner that can't serve you peanuts. The problem is that we're not going to run out of oil. The problem is that it'll never be cheap again. And so we have a situation in America in which a tremendous advantage we have had with land, being a continental nation. We can move, we can spread out, we can have big lots, we can drive everywhere, we can assume that everybody will have a car, actually becomes a disadvantage. And the constrained little European cities suddenly have an advantage. The fact that you can get in Germany from one city to the other in an hour, and here it takes a very long time, used to be an advantage. All the land, now it's a disadvantage. So we have to get ready for the 21st century. In the 21st century, the first generation is now 20 to 25-year-old. You saw how young my crew was. It's their century. And if this is not recognizable to you, it's because we're designing for them. Now, in an interesting way, we had no choice but to design for them. And it goes like this. By the way, before I say anything, I know that you are pleased to hear that you're unique. You will be pleased. Everybody is always pleased to hear that their town is unique. And I'm a very straightforward guy, but I always lie. And I say, you are indeed unique, because it's just the way it gets you in the door. Most American cities are absolutely not unique at all. They're virtually interchangeable. There's a couple of dozen that are unique, but American cities are very, very similar. You actually are unique, and not in a good way. This is what I see. A commitment to an incredibly successful industry for 100 years, a great achievement that has made you world famous, and a position that is now in decline. And that decline is never going to crash. You do have an extraordinary geographic location and an embedded culture and a whole list of things. This will never shut down as a furniture center, but the competition is everywhere arising. You know, Atlanta, this, Dubai, the Chinese, and so forth. So what you have here is a glide downwards, a glide, and I don't think that's news to you. The high point may have been, let's say, 2002, 2004, but there's a glide, and things there are changing. You have heard me earlier say, perhaps, in one of these 11 meetings, that I do think that you actually have to get ready for a crash, you know, for something in which, you know, you have to really switch out your current commitment, your current single, as it were, taxpayer downtown. I don't think you have to switch out. I'm not convinced that it's going to be a glide. But what you need to do is keep the young people, and that becomes the theme. And keeping the young people of the 21st century is very different from the 20th. Okay, and that's why this plan is both unique to you, it's going to seem as special to you, and it's unique to us. So I'm going to now start. Okay. This slide. Your downtown is absolutely empty. Okay, and we walk it because we work downtown, and it is absolutely clean. That is very odd. Most empty downtowns are decrepit. You know the pictures of Detroit, right? They're empty and falling apart. Your downtown is empty and impeccable. This morning, there were 2 people out there killing weeds, lest they grow in this juncture between the concrete and the asphalt. Okay, as a doctor looks at your eyes and your skin and says you're healthy or not, I can look at the maintenance level of your downtown and say you are doing well economically, but there's a peculiar situation in that it's completely empty. The people we used to, it was funny, walking around was us. We would see each other, the team would meet each other. That's all we saw. Okay, so you have this situation. This is the team, Wendy in the front in the colorful dress, and you should know that the team actually is in itself, I am not an expert. The team as a whole is expert, and it's the combination of our method, of the charrette, which is all about learning what's local, and Peter Freeman with local know-how. Okay, so Peter knows the local stuff, we know the general theory, together we are an intelligent team. Individually, we're not complete. But because Peter and his office has been present the entire time, there's a transference that occurs, and he is now an expert on this plan. And so when you ask us who takes over now, I might be called in for emergencies, but essentially you have a team in place that knows how to move this forward. Okay? This is you. You provided the third leg of your local concerns. Now, an interesting thing happened during the charrettes, these 11 meetings. By the way, Aaron, it wasn't 11 meetings, it was about 20 meetings. Because every time I stepped outside to a parking lot, every time I had dinner, it turned into a meeting. And I think it has to do due to wonderful public relations. People could identify us, and they would come out of the bars and pizza joints and talk to us. So I consider this to be a 20-meeting charrette. But you people here, with very, 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 very few exceptions, it was entirely a positive experience. The meetings were very different from the usual American meeting, and I think the negativity, the skepticism, the belly aching in other charrettes comes from fear. There's a fear that, you know, most of the time we're brought in when a city is in trouble. Way in trouble, and it's hard to pull out. You are not in trouble at all. You're not in trouble. You might be in decline, but you're not in trouble. And I think there was an absence of nervousness in these meetings that gave it a much, much easier tone. There wasn't that kind of fear, that kind of resentment, that kind of thing which is so common in the public discussion in America. And that comes from the fact that you're economically viable and you're catching the decline early, really early, and so you're not nervous or resentful. There was an awful lot of work done people giving their opinion, as we see in this enormous stack. Beautifully handled. The newspaper was excellent as well. And here's something. One came in like this, which I love. Okay, somebody actually came in, it could be one of you, and placed an order as if it were a restaurant. Okay, you may note that I never wrote anything down during the charrette. When you said something, we need this, we need that, I didn't write it down because that gives the impression that because you asked for it, it will happen. And that's not the way it works. Okay, there was pushback immediately when something was said that was unrealistic, that you didn't need, that was a little bit of a, you know, absolutely unnecessary. I tried to kill it as quickly as I could. But anything that had a chance, we brought to life. And I think you're gonna recognize some very late additions, like you need an assembly hall downtown. When did we hear that? Day before yesterday, for the first time. Perhaps it was even, I don't think it was yesterday, but the day before yesterday. At one point we heard, what about a transit line? And the next day we had a proposal. So anything that has a chance that made sense, we brought to life. But we didn't bring everything to life. We also stayed inside our boundaries. There was a lot of call. What about me? What about this? What about Washington Street? What about the Southwest? I said, no, we're staying inside the line, you know, because there's enough to do right there. It's a really big place that we had to work with. And also it's 4 places, as you will see. So most of the pushback that I did was saying, no, that's another plan. You know, that's another mission. It's not our mission. You've seen this diagram before, perhaps. It's super important. It's what makes you unique, genuinely unique. You have the you have the Everest of spikes, which are the 2 weekly, you know, you have small shoulders, but you have 2 great spikes, which are the market. Spikes are terrible for commerce. Any kind of spike is terrible for commerce, because it means you have to staff up enormously and staff down. Okay? The fact that you can serve, that you can transport, house, and feed 80,000 people, doubling your population, actually gives rise to something that we took on and we're counting on, which is that you're logistical geniuses. Okay? There's a huge amount of software in this town in terms of organization, formal and informal. In terms of organization, by the way, I wonder, I really don't like that light because what it is washing out the slides. Could we take it off, please? That light up there, and you certainly don't need to see me. Thank you very much. Wow, this university is so efficient. Do you know what's it like at Harvard? You need to bring the union in to do that. Amazing. So anyway, these spikes are terrible for commerce. The only thing they're good for, absolutely uniquely, is your tax base. But it has made our life incredibly difficult because not only are you open, you need to have huge capacity buildings, but then actually they don't really die so that we can rehabilitate them. They're closed. They're in hibernation. I've never been to a place where the storefronts are in hibernation, which is to say they're paying lease, but they're not available for our revitalization. Okay, now look at what we're confronting. We're the downtown that looks empty, and the storefronts are full and being paid for. And the first thing that I asked the first few meetings is, could you remind me what I'm supposed to do with this? What are we supposed to do? Well, of course, we noticed the other phenomena, which is you have an enormous number of parking lots that are not being used. Most surface parking lots are being used. So there's an asset there. And so apart from the incredible sort of logistical genius that you have, the ability to feed people with food trucks and transportation, you also have parking lots. Okay, now notice the ingredients that we're working with. Your goodwill, parking lots, and management genius. Okay. Spikes, this is what happens if you were to get yourself a baseball field, not to be recommended. First of all, you're competing with, that's been done nearby, you still get spikes. This is what happens when you get, this isn't too bad, these are movies. You get weekend spikes. It begins to even out.